My school wouldn't let me graduate because I'd missed school to fight leukemia. I turned it into the best thing to ever happen to me. But I got even worse news on my real graduation day. I was standing in line at graduation when the principal pulled me aside and said I wouldn't be getting my diploma. "You missed 87 days for chemotherapy. I'm sorry, but policy is policy," he said, while my parents sat in the bleachers thinking they were watching their cancer survivor son graduate. I had a 4.0 GPA and spent every chemo session doing homework, but he said none of that mattered because I hadn't logged enough hours in the building. I'd have to repeat senior year just to make up attendance days. I'd missed getting poison pumped into my veins. I spent the summer watching my friends leave for college while I prepared to sit in the same classrooms with kids a year younger than me. My oncologist wrote a letter to the school board explaining that missing school for cancer treatment shouldn't count as truancy, but they voted 7-0 to uphold the decision. The superintendent said making exceptions would set a dangerous precedent even for dying children. My mom cried every morning dropping me off at the building where everyone knew I was the kid who beat cancer but couldn't beat the attendance policy. Teachers looked at me with pity while I sat through lessons I'd already mastered. The worst part was seeing my empty chair at college orientation photos my friends posted. Then Elizabeth transferred in from another state and sat next to me in creative writing without knowing anything about my situation. She just saw me writing in my notebook during lunch instead of eating and asked if she could read it. I'd been documenting everything from the diagnosis to the chemo to the school treating me like a criminal for surviving. "This is insane," she said, reading about how they made me repeat senior year for staying alive. "You need to turn this into a book because people need to know this happens." She started eating lunch with me every day and helped me organize my notes into chapters about radiation burns and attendance sheets. We spent afternoons in the library with her typing while I talked about throwing up between classes and still maintaining perfect grades that meant nothing. She never treated me like a victim, and that's why I started falling for her while she turned my pain into paragraphs. Elizabeth's dad worked in publishing, and she sent him my manuscript without telling me. 3 weeks later he called, saying he wanted to publish it and thought it could help change policies nationwide. The book came out in February, and suddenly reporters were calling the school asking why they punished a cancer patient for getting treatment. The principal held an emergency assembly telling students not to talk to media about internal school matters, but someone leaked the video of him announcing my failure to graduate. My story went viral, and other kids started sharing how the school failed them during medical crises. Parents flooded board meetings with printed chapters from my book demanding explanations. The superintendent went on local news claiming I was exaggerating and that the school had always been supportive while my chemo port scar was literally visible on my neck. By April, the book hit the New York Times bestseller list, and I was getting invited to speak at education conferences about antiquated attendance policies that kill kids. Colleges that had rejected me because I was still technically in high school started calling with full scholarship offers and apologies. The school board held emergency meetings trying to do damage control, while parents demanded answers about their inflexible policies that valued seats filled over lives saved. I did an interview on national television where I thanked Elizabeth for believing my story mattered and showed the rejection letters from the school board dismissing my cancer as an excuse. The host cried on air reading the chapter about missing prom for chemo while the school marked me absent and failed me in physical education. Graduation day came again, and this time I had a real diploma waiting, but also a book tour starting the next day at cancer centers across the country. The principal had to hand me my diploma in front of 800 people who'd all read about what he did to a dying child. His hands shook as he was forced to smile for the photo, while knowing everyone saw him as the villain in a best-selling book about educational cruelty. Elizabeth was valedictorian and used her entire speech to talk about how institutions fail vulnerable students and mentioned me by name 5 times. The crowd gave me a standing ovation when I walked across the stage while the school board members sat frozen in their seats. After the ceremony, I was taking pictures with Elizabeth and my parents. When the headache hit me so hard, I dropped to my knees. The same headache I'd been hiding for weeks because I couldn't miss any more school. Elizabeth caught me as I fell, and I saw the terror in her eyes because she'd read every word about my symptoms in the book. "It's back, isn't it?" she whispered as my vision started going black and I tasted metal in my mouth. My mom was screaming for someone to call an ambulance while my dad held my head. The principal walked by and actually smiled when he saw me on the ground bleeding from my nose. "Guess you won't make that book tour after all," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. Full story.